Hello and welcome to episode 42 of On My Studio Table. Behind me I have a recent art quilt or piece of textile art which I've called The Land Remembers, and I've covered that pretty well in a previous video, so I've just hung it up because I like to decorate my studio with different artworks. On the mannequin is a lovely cardigan that I eco-printed, which I did show you a few videos ago, but it was on a hanger, and I thought I'd put it on the mannequin because then you get the feel of what it really looks like on a person. I've paired it with a lovely slip. It's one that I dyed with wattle bark, which dyes a pinkish reddish terracotta colour depending on the fabric and so on. The cardigan is wool, and it's just a really lovely style. It's sort of a jacket style, and I've eco-printed that with eucalyptus leaves from our property. And both of these are listed at gonerustic.com in the wearable section. I've called this video Inside Out because I spent a fair bit of time outside, probably not as much as my husband did, and you'll find that out as the video goes along. But I've also been inside working on different projects, and I just wanted to share some updates with you. It's an absolutely beautiful autumn day. I've just come out looking for my husband Ian. He's been working on the property, getting rid of old fences that had fallen down and lots of wire and old posts and things like that. And because the undergrowth had built up around where the fence was, there are lots of branches and bits of wood that have fallen down over the years while we weren't living here, so he's clearing them all up. Some of them are quite big, so it's going to take a little bit more work. If I just go over here, you can see this is a big fallen limb, and that's going to take a bit more work because that'll be heavy and it will need cutting up. But it's just so lovely to be out here, and I'll just take you past these piles of sticks and so on, and show you where he's cleared this. So there used to be a falling down wire fence here and all along our access road, and there are still bits of it, but he's done meters and meters of it, which is fantastic. And just here under the trees there was another fence that he cleared away, and it's looking much better now, and clearing away the undergrowth except for what's native to the area, so he's left that. And if you look back towards the house, there we are, and just behind the little trees to the right of the pile of wood and building materials is where the art shed's going to be. There's Mount Elephant in all its glory. And here you'll see the area that Ian cleared up, which I videoed a few of my episodes ago, where he cleared all the undergrowth, cleared away some piles of dirt, and you'll see on the right a pile of branches where he's been clearing the fence near the road as well. So it's looking so much better. He'll just keep slashing the ferns to keep this clear. Because it's so close to the house, we don't want it to get too overgrown. It's about 10:30 a.m. and just see some more hills and mountains in the distance, and the creeks down where the gum trees are. This is a bit further towards the east, and this was quite a sizable piece of wood that was buried in the undergrowth, and you can see the remnants of a fence there with the posts, one in front of the tree and one just behind that wattle tree, and the wire's all been removed. and further along that way as well. And you can see that these are big trees, and this one in particular is very high. I'd probably fall over backwards if I lean back too much to film it. There's an old fence post and some fallen timber. So just making piles of it, and when the fire permit season is over, because we're heading into winter, he'll burn them, and the other pieces he'll save so we can have them for our fire. That's beautiful lichen on this tree. It's a wattle tree and it's coming towards the end of its life, and behind it is a eucalypt. Not sure when this pile of dirt ended up here. I think it was either when the house was being built or prior to being built, when it was being excavated to level the site. And there's a few others where ferns have grown over as well. So Ian wants to spread those out. I don't know if you can see it. I'm following a track here, which is a wallaby or kangaroo track. They keep the same paths for generations, which is why it disrupts them so much when we build roads and so on, and why we often see them dead on the road, because they're just following the ancient paths, as they say. And the house is just there over the rise. A couple of huge dead eucalypts, which we will probably cut down because there'll be a danger, and there'll be a lot of firewood in that, of course. And just below in the ferns is the mower, which Ian's also been using because it's a mulching mower. So it's actually really good for enriching the ground because it mulches everything up, it doesn't just cut it. And some more piles of dirt, which Ian's been gradually clearing so he can spread them out. He does a lot of this by hand. I think he's quite amazing. I'm probably not biased or anything. So there's our boundary fence. And this is where the electricity comes through our land to our house. And we are on the grid, but we have solar panels. So we hardly pay any power bills. Our last one was $6.73. So where those stakes are is where the art shed will be, and it's a lovely sunny spot. There will be skylights as well as a big window, so there should be good light because there won't be any power to it, at least initially. And you can just see the solar panels there as well. And the tractor parked under the tree. I've just cleared enough space so I can work on my journal cover for the circle project with Lisbeth Degn of Dragenkunst. And I was playing with some strips because I might make another tiny scroll. One of the suggestions we had in Catherine Chambers's group was to make a scroll out of all the tiny little scraps left over from our coverlet of comfort. Well, I've filled that one and I have more scraps. So I've been playing with some strips to see what I can do. And while I was playing with them, I thought maybe I should do something more to this cover. I did mention when I first made the cover that I might do a bit more to it and that I might do a spine or a spine cover. So this morning that's what I did, and I used a bit of naturally dyed cheesecloth and used glue stick to glue it on to keep it in place, and then I wanted to add some stitching. But while I was playing with the strips, this one kind of fell down and I thought, oh, that might make a really nice embellishment to the spine on the front. And then, depending how I stitch it down, maybe the key could be stitched down there and I could couch that bit of string. And I'd still keep the sari ribbon for a tie, but I possibly will attach it. You can just get it into the shot. Attach it here so it doesn't get lost. So that's where I'm heading at the moment. Sometimes these happy accidents really boost your creativity, but you've got to be aware and you need to really be observant, I guess. Quite often we go through life and we just don't take notice of things, but part of the creative process is to notice. So I've got some silk thread, which is beautiful to stitch with. It's a bit like a pearl cotton, but softer and smoother. Probably equal to about a number 5. And I'm just stitching it down pretty much however it falls. And because I don't want to stitch into the pages underneath, I've put this ruler as a barrier underneath where I'm stitching so that I don't catch the pages. And then I'll just go in and out with a fairly freeform running stitch, not being too precise and not making the stitches too small. And I've already stitched down one fold there. I'll just keep going. This is a strip of silk, and it was eco-printed but ended up very pale. So I've been using it for lots of different things. I just tore a piece off. So I don't know if I want that sticking out into the cover. So I'll just manipulate it a little bit, maybe like that. And a running stitch is easy to pull out if I find that I don't like it. But I think it will be okay. It's important not to overthink things sometimes and just to go with the flow. And quite often you get surprises that you wouldn't have had. Pleasant surprises. I'm using the grey thread partly because it matches the naturally dyed fabric that I've done for the cover. Just manipulate that a bit more. Not sure what I'm going to do there. I might just leave that for the moment and just keep stitching along this in this direction. I use my needles for a very long time and they actually get a bit blunt, and I think this one is getting a bit blunt. But I hang on to them and then I wonder why they might be difficult to actually stitch through what I'm sewing. So there, that piece is sticking out a bit, so I'll just bring that in. And that's rather nice the way that's folding. I could whip this running stitch just by weaving a thread through the stitches, and that could be the same thread or a different colour. I think last video my comfort coverlet had a whipped running stitch with 2 different colours. One was cream, and then the one I ran through the stitches was a variegated burgundy and gold kind of thread. So you can play with the effects, but I'm thinking that this should be simple and just allow the textures and so on to work. Just going to let that stick out a little bit, but I'll make a little pleat here. Just need to make sure I catch it so it doesn't come undone. And that's probably far enough. And I'll just do a little back stitch there and go inside. And I do a single French knot to finish, and I might just weave it in a little bit as well. I might be a bit paranoid, but I do like to make sure that they're not going to come undone. So let's just have a look at that. maybe I can leave that there and do something decorative. I'll put the key back. If I have it a bit lower, it means that when I do the sari ribbon tie, it won't interfere with the tie, because if I put the key here, it would be partially covered up, and I really would like it to show. And I won't stitch it all down either. I think I'll attach it at the top but let it be loose, and this will hold it down when I couch that. I've now got the ruler under this again, and I'm laying the key down, just positioning it where I think it should go. And there's a little ring at the top, so I might actually come up from underneath, if I can do that, and still hold it in place. I'll just do it by feel, I think. Look at that, I came up through the hole. So I'll just go on each side, I think. Lots of things to get tangled around here. So maybe a couple of stitches on this side. And a couple on that side. So it'll still be loose at the bottom, but it won't swing around too much. And then I'll do maybe through the knot that's in the string at the top. And that should hang quite nicely. And again. So now I will start couching this, and I'm not going to make it go straight. I'm just going to let it be as it naturally is. Hope you can see that. I'm having to bunch it up a bit. Now I can lay it flat. And of course it's hooked around the key. And I'll just go from side to side rather than around. I noticed that other people use that technique too. I used to go around, but it does use more thread, and I also found that it's easier to keep your stitches straighter and neater this way. I sometimes use cross stitch as well for couching, and I've played with the distances between the stitches as well. I'm being a bit more freeform here, so I'm doing them kind of as they come. And it doesn't mean that I don't know how to do it evenly. It just means that I've decided to do it this way. It's about relaxing and enjoying the process as well. We'll call it Rustic. This stitching also will keep the spine cover in place, and I might add more stitching to that as well as I go around to the back, because I used a glue stick to stick it down. That was mainly just so that it was easier to stitch it so it wouldn't move and I wouldn't have to use pins. I quite like that effect of it not being perfectly even. I hope you enjoyed the little walk down the property where I showed you what Ian's been doing with clearing the fences and the undergrowth and getting rid of the fallen wood. It's partly for fire control or fire prevention, because the undergrowth is where often fires start first, and if it burns too fiercely then it goes up into the trees. And if you give it not too much to be able to feed on, so to speak, on the ground, it doesn't become such a wild fire. On the bush side of the road, even though it's quite close to the house, we've got the road as a kind of a fire break between us. And if we keep things fairly clear around the house, it does help. Makes us feel a bit more secure as well. And some trees that have self-sown, we may have to eventually remove for that reason. But at the moment, we'll leave them as they are. It's autumn in Tasmania, and it's one of those beautiful clear days. We had a little bit of a frost this morning, not too severe. We had the fire going last night, and that was lovely. And we used some of the wood that Ian has removed from the undergrowth, so that's useful for several reasons. There we go. I'll just pull the ruler out. So that's it so far. I'll think about what I'm going to do here, whether I pleat it again and bring it in, or whether I just embellish that with something. We'll see. I've arranged the sari ribbon tie where I want it so that it ties here, because it needs to wrap around. And now I know where I need to stitch it onto the spine. So I'll just undo it. So this is the wraparound bit, and this is the bit that I need to attach. So I'll just put a pin in there, in the place where I want it to be. So now that I've got the pin there, just make that a bit more precise. I'm going to attach it there where the pin is under the cloth. I've just had to put the tie back on because I forgot to actually pin the sari in position, the sari ribbon. So now I'll undo it again and put a pin through everything. And that way I'll make sure it's in the right spot. So it looks all wrong because this is so long and this is so short, but it works because I wrap it. So I'll just put the knot underneath. Now I can take that pin out, it won't be in my way, and I'll just do a few stitches. This needle is getting a bit blunt. Why do I persist with it? Maybe I'm taking no waste too far. Need to make it reasonably strong because I don't want it to pull off. It's going to get a fair bit of handling. Just going to make sure I actually catch the cover and not the paper. That looks as though it's pretty well firmly attached. And because it's cheesecloth that I've used, it's got an open weave, and I might need to take it through to the back as well. You can see it's right near the spine there. I can feel the sari ribbon. if I get concerned about it, I can always put a bit of reinforcing fabric inside there. So here it is done. I've tied the ribbon, and I do love that sari ribbon. That was dyed with onion skins. The key is attached. We've got the ruffled up strip of silk, and the sari ribbon is attached. I have some lovely buttons, vintage ones of all sorts, so I might find something that will go there, or maybe even a row of them. I'll just think about that and have a bit of a rummage. I eventually found Ian. He's just going to the area that I was going to take you to earlier. And this is a pile of sticks that he took out of the undergrowth just this morning. And another pile that he did this morning. A little bit of Mount Elephant through the trees there. And a sapling, eucalyptus. These are the size trees that I am able to harvest my leaves from because I can reach them. But they grow into big trees. This is a path that Ian cut with the fern hook. So he could get to this really big tree, which I have showed you before from the road. This is the one that we think might be 200 years old, and dropped a couple of really big branches. We've never been able to get this close to it because it was so overgrown. So this has all been cleared, all by hand. Ian just pointed out to me a little tiny blackwood tree. It's a type of acacia, and they are just a lovely tree. They have a beautiful shape, and apparently they are also fire retardant. And I'll just show you the view behind it and next to this very old tree. We've now gone onto the road because we still can't get around the tree on this side otherwise, and we're just going to have a look on the other side of it, and that's the adult blackwood tree that probably dropped that little sapling that we just saw. Now we're coming off the road and into the cleared area, and we'll have a look at the other side of the big tree. Just try not to fall over. And there it is behind this tree branch. And there's the path that Ian cut. Ian has been busy this morning. There's another pile of branches and so on that he's cut up and made a pile from. And then I'll just turn around and we'll make our way a bit closer to the big tree. You can see the thickness of the undergrowth that Ian's had to deal with to get to this branch, or several big limbs that have fallen on the ground. And as I said, he's been doing that with a fern hook, just by hand. You can see how far away we are from the house. We're just walking back now from the big tree. So this is my second walk today. I'm getting plenty of exercise. few years ago, I made a series of books with Coptic binding using eco-printed papers. And I actually attached pieces of fabric to the pages, and they flowed out in quite long lengths, made with wool and silk. And I entered one of them in a juried exhibition, and I was rejected. This doesn't happen all the time. I have had work accepted many times, but it's interesting how it can make you feel a bit less than confident about your work when something like that happens. So I put them away. One of them I cut up and used for other things. This one I started to cut bits out of to use for other things, and all of them I took the fabric off and either sold them as fabric or used them to make other art. Sometimes you know that you've developed a bit since you made a particular item and you think, well, I think I can do better and maybe I can incorporate this into something else or rework it. And that's quite a valid way to work. And I was encouraged by a video I saw the other day by an American artist called Ariane Zurcher. And she mentioned this about confidence levels and about reusing artwork or other things that you've made which haven't found a use or could be repurposed. And that encouraged me to give it a go. So this one I haven't done yet, so I'll put that aside, but I have some ideas for it. This one I have done. It's made out of mainly really nice quality sketchbook paper. I think there is a bit of cardi paper in it as well. And you can see here I had cut out a section, probably because there was a nice leaf print on it and I probably used it on a card or something like that. And what I did was I patched it. So I used another piece of eco-printed paper and glued that on, then collaged this piece on, and this part also was glued in underneath this section because I'd torn off that section. So it just has now been transformed into something else. And so I went through the book, or journal, or whatever you call it. It was an art journal, I guess. And wherever I found a place that needed patching, I put some patches. And I thought this is a great way to celebrate mending and reusing and repurposing, which is part of my zero waste approach. But I think it also added something to the book. Here is another patch with a little bit of collage over the top. And if I lift the page out, you might be able to see that there's a little hole. And I left that because it's like a little window. And the back is interesting as well. And when I cut out the original piece from the book, I didn't cut it out very straight, but I left it like that because it's part of its story. This is a bit of cardboard. I think I used it to clamp on the outside of a bundle of papers. And you can see the remnants of the fabric as well, where I just cut them off roughly, and I've left that too. That's part of a bit of advertising that I eco-dyed and printed. And some of the pages are intact. This is another bit of the same kind of paper. It has a map on one side and ads on the other side, and it eco-printed quite dark because I had Rustic cans in the bundle. It looks totally different on the back, but it's actually made a little bit of an insert there. So this could be added to now. It could be drawn in, it could be collaged into, little inserts, tabs, all sorts of things. So I've decided rather than keep it, I'll make it available for sale. And this one also has the Coptic binding, and the back cover is also patched. It just, I think, might even make it more interesting than it was originally, although I did love it with the fabric pages. So I guess the moral of the story is don't be discouraged, put it away for a while, think about it, and then maybe it can find another use. In last week's video, I shared a little bit about getting started on another page in my Wetlands journal. I had neglected it for a little while, and I quite enjoyed getting back into it. This is the page that I shared with you, and it was only partially done. I've now finished it. I've added some grass or reeds. I've put some rays, if you can think of that as a sun. I'm not sure if it is, but I put some rays on it. And I also finished stitching the bird, which I think is a heron. And then I thought, what else can I do? And if you watched my last video, you will have seen my stitch exercise that I did in the circle project. And we did holes and then crossed threads over the holes after punching around the edge of it. So that gave us a place to put our needle. And that was quite symmetrical. And then I thought, well, what if I join some of this together in the same way, but not so symmetrically? And I used a thin black thread, and I really liked the result. And I guess what it reminds me of is the network and the way everything is interconnected. So when you think of a wetland, you know there are animals and birds living there, particularly birds. You know that there are creatures in the water. You know that there are certain plants growing there that don't grow anywhere else. And they all depend on each other. And I thought, when the birds are in danger of becoming extinct, which some of them are, if they do become extinct, that connection is lost between their environment and them. And that has a knock-on effect, as we know. This next page, I again used a tea bag, as I did on the previous one, but this is a different type of tea bag, and it gives bigger coverage in the background. And I like the way that it's a bit transparent and you can see the sheet music through it. And then I used some of the pieces of the publicity material from the conservation organisation that I've been using in this journal. And these were pieces that I had already torn bits out of, as on the other page, but I thought they could still be useful. And so I laid them out, and this was the layout that I came up with. I also had this little bit of paper with just the word birds on it, just partially obscured because I'd torn it off. And I left the other piece on it because I thought I might stamp some text. And in the end, I stamped the word gone, because these white shapes are meant to be ghostly shapes for what would or could happen if birds become extinct, and they would be gone. And I added some stitching to represent plants so they don't look particularly like any plant that grows, but it has that kind of inference. And so I've used a pistol stitch here, some straight stitches here, a bit of feather stitch, and a bit more pistol stitch up there. This is a little piece of eco-printed paper, and I've also used eco-printed paper to reinforce the edges. This is the third page that I worked on. And again, you'll recognise the different stitches I've used, and I'll do various combinations of these right through the book, as I have already done. I used red for the fly stitch to represent the footprints, because I thought, if we don't see the footprints anymore, does that mean the birds are not there anymore? And it was kind of like an alarm bell to me to think about that kind of concept, and that's why I've done them in red. Red is for danger or for a warning, and I think that we are being warned over and over again. But what we're doing about it is another thing, and not everyone, especially those in authority and the ones who make decisions, really seem to heed those warnings that we're getting. And I don't want to be depressing about it, but I do think we need to raise awareness of it. And this book is not just about being an art journal, it's actually my way of making a comment about this issue and my concern about it. So I've done the ghostly shape again of the bird, which is a duck, and representational stitching for plant life, and here as well. And this is a little torn piece that I didn't know if would be useful or not, but it actually ended up looking a bit like a tree trunk. I only have a couple of pages left to do in this journal, and then I will put a binding in it, Probably I will use a Slipknot binding, which I've used for a couple of previous journals as well. And I'll put a link to the instructions for that. I learned it from other people on the YouTube channels, so I won't teach that, but I will link to them. I also did some work in my fast fashion journal, but I'll save that for the next video, and we'll see how much I can get done before then.